Kiran Nagarkar is an Indian novelist, playwright and screenwriter whose voice has been resonating since the 1970s against authoritarianism and fundamentalism. Author of several books including the Ravan and Eddy trilogy, he also wrote bedtime story based partly on Mahabharata, drawing the ire of the fundamentalist Hindu organizations and political parties.
First of all, I'm glad that I'm standing because I'm told that 95 or 98% of the time I hold the mic and look this way or that way. So it becomes irrelevant what I say, which is actually a good thing, but we let that be. I have to say at the very start that there are things that will be discussed here today which I'm sure have been discussed already or at least been mentioned. So if there is repetition, and I'm sure that it's bound to be the case, I must ask your forgiveness for not knowing what was said earlier. And even if I had known, how do I avoid the subject? There's one other warning that I have to give. I tried to write this at the last minute because there were some other problems. And if I stumble and don't keep the thread alive, again I have to apologize and ask for your forgiveness. Okay, no more preluding. I'm about to set forth a proposition that is so simple, it could easily be interpreted as a cliche. But beware is all I will say at this point. Words and actions have consequences, many a time terrible consequences. We could take heart from the fact that the words and actions are from the ruling party, emanating right from the Prime Minister to the millions of believers in Hindutva. Since we are in no way accountable for their fanaticism, their non-stop double-speak, or their shocking and wounding words, their prejudices or their brutality or criminal actions, how then are we responsible? Because we hear their dreadful words and witness their hideous acts. I know you're here today, but you know, we are not the whole of Bombay and we are not the whole of India. So I'll repeat this. Because we hear their dreadful words and witness their hideous acts and do nothing. It's their words and actions, and yet my most terrifying fear that we too are going to end up losing the one quality and virtue which no other species in the animal kingdom shares with us, our humanity, our capacity to care intensely for our fellow beings and to fight on their behalf. Many a time I have felt that Harsh Mandar is one of the few who really has gone out of his way to genuinely fight. I am again, of course, as guilty as anybody else. I come here once in a blue moon and then say these words. So I know how responsible I am also. Let me change the tracks. I stand before you today to confess how much I owe to the ruling party. They have time and again pointed out what a miserable education my parents gave me. However late it may be, I have realized how ill-informed I am and I have now enrolled in a primary school in both UP and Madhya Pradesh, the two most advanced states in the subcontinent. Imagine, I was taught that the Taj Mahal was built by Shah Jahan when it was a Hindu temple, or that the great Akbar was not great at all, and that it has now come to light that Rana Pratap, who is indeed a very fine king, should get the prefix great because he won the battle of Haldighat. I am hoping to study under perhaps the greatest scholar India has produced, none other than Dinanath Batraji, who has rewritten the history of India. But the one who has really reframed the field of science education for me is none other than our Honorable Prime Minister. Till he came on the national scene, I was taught that the Wright brothers were perhaps the earliest inventors of aeroplane technology. Wrong, wrong and wrong again. Sri Ram of Ayodhya had been flying planes millennia before that. They were called Pushpak Vimans. As a matter of fact, while today most advanced planes can only fly forward, poor things, our planes from ancient times could fly in reverse and sideways too. Our advances in science did not stop there. Once again, it was our ancient ancestors who invented the science of transplantation. As our revered PM pointed out when he was opening the Kokila Ben Ambani Hospital, we were practicing it in prehistoric times, damn it. Ganeshji was a prime example of that. And needless to say, there were countless other scientific fields where we have been at the forefront. But there's much more than that they have taught me. Nehru, Abul Kalam Azad, and all the other freedom fighters were entirely figments of the imagination. And quite naturally, they have been disappeared. Even more important, ours was not the most unique freedom struggle in the world. Gandhiji's non-violent freedom struggle, I have now realized, is nothing but a myth. I am so grateful for another unforgettable lesson. The current political leaders are never wrong. Please understand this. Have you ever heard them say, "Acha bhai, I'm sorry I got it wrong"? Of course not. How could they? Because they are always right and don't make a mistake about it. I'll be very upset if you do. You saw how brilliantly it was proven in the case of demonetization. For the last 3 years, I have been advising the top honchos in the ruling party that they owe it to Mrs. Sonia Gandhi to give her India's highest honor, the Bharat Ratna. For without her sheer indifference to the monumental corruption of some of her ministers and party members and the consequent damage to the economy, the loss of jobs and suffering of the people who lived below the poverty line, along with the public's rising anger, the BJP would never have come to power with such a thumping majority. I am afraid that if the current political leaders manage to sweep the Gujarat elections, God forbid, then the Congress party's Manishankar Iyer would also have to be given the Bharat Ratna. For without his speech, his niche speech, the Prime Minister's fiery and repetitive rhetoric couldn't have got such incredible mileage. It got such an overwhelming response. The effect on the Congress, fortunes of the Congress, is likely to be disastrous. I told you I'll get confused. I am, but never mind. Three years ago, when I read the speech, have I mentioned the transplantation? Yes. Oh, I mentioned, okay. So 3 years ago when I had read the speech, I had thought that school and college going students, the parents of these people, of the students, would pounce on the PM and tick him off for confusing mythology with science. They would ask him, is this what he wanted their children who wish to be scientists and doctors to be taught? There was not a peep out of the millions of parents who harbored such high ambitions and hopes for their children. Many decades ago, my brother had said to me that sarcasm and irony were the loser's tools. There is no denying that I am suffering from the loser's disease. The truth of my brother's remark was reinforced when I looked up the Prime Minister's speech at the inauguration of the hospital on the internet and discovered that there were at least 20 comments lauding the wisdom of the Prime Minister's talk. For years now, the BJP has gone out of its way to alienate the Muslim population. And it hardly mentioned the Babri Masjid tragedy and its horrendous consequences in Mumbai and the rest of Maharashtra. In 2002, we witnessed the massacres of 2,000 Muslims and the displacement of over 100,000 Muslim families. In the last 3 years, we have seen a studied escalation of the persecution of our Muslim brothers and sisters. On last Thursday, the BJP candidate from Dabhoi, Sailesh Sotta Mehta, I might be mispronouncing it, I beg his pardon, had asked his audience to reduce, in quotes, reduce the numbers of those in Dadi and Topi, again inverted commas. On the very next day, he stood side by side with the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, a fine yogi, if you've ever met one, Yogi Adityanath, and replaced Dadi and Topi with the words anti-social elements, who he insisted must be oppressed and threatened. I am not making up these words, that's what he said. As you're well aware, this kind of language is common currency among the Saffronites. But what is beyond comprehension is that the BJP leaders and the great majority of Indians cannot even understand, or more likely, they are so short-sighted they refuse to grasp the simple truth that words and actions have consequences. There's constant talk of how the Muslim terrorists are springing up everywhere. What in God's name do you expect when you persecute a people, cook up fantasies like love jihad and ghar wapasi, kill them on the false pretext of protecting cows, and speak of them in the most degrading terms? The Hindutva Brigade does this despite the express constitutional guarantee that the lives of every citizen of this country, whatever her or his religion, is sacrosanct, and no one must be allowed to hold his faith above anybody else's. Oh, make no mistake, these terrible sins and crimes of the ruling party will come home to roost with a vengeance. The ruling party is playing into the hands of the extremists, even though they talk non-stop about erasing the extremists. Which is not to mention, of course, that theirs is such a moderate stance. I actually worship them all the time. The title of this session of the Mumbai Collective is The Culture of Fear. I suspect it refers primarily to the fear engendered in the Muslim population, or even in the Christian community, as you will recall from the articles of the former Commissioner of Police, Julio Ribeiro. I need hardly mention the Dalits, who have been once again been the victims of appalling persecution. And of course, this also holds for the very poor in this country. Along with the selective victimization of the Muslims and even some Christians, what you have is the fear that journalists who expose financial hanky-panky or corruption within the ruling party must feel, thanks to the CBI or some such agency, going after them entirely on false pretexts, that they too will one day either be in prison or perhaps, God forbid, wiped out the way Daborkar and Pansare and the other gentleman from Karnataka, Kalburi and the Gauri were wiped out. These are very real and dangerous issues, as I have already discussed. As we have seen time and again, the operative word for this regime is impunity, whether it be hate crimes or the promulgation of ordinances like demonetization. Quite apart from the constant shifting of the goalposts involved in justifying demonetization, what is truly incomprehensible is the silent support of those who suffered the most. All this because of the new mantra, which works for all purposes, national interest, patriotism, and Bharat Mata. Besides, economic luminaries like Pangria and Bhagwati have time and again insisted that demonetization was a huge success. My God, there is a good slip of the tongue. I hope I keep making it. There was a huge success and a boon to the economy. How dare I disagree with them? After all, it was only a few 100,000 who lost their jobs, who found it extremely difficult to have a meal once a day at least. So my thanks again to these very fine professors from Columbia who have really backed the Prime Minister to the hilt. But what is my greatest and worst fear is that I keep asking myself, are we all suffering from an acute comatose disease? How come we don't bring the city and the country to a standstill when the gravest crimes and neglect are committed thanks to our silence and the complicity of silence? These are times when I find it difficult to tell whether I am in Trump's America or in Trump's India. The lies, the excuses, the holier-than-thou pretexts of just keep rolling out. The fake news or post-truth seem to be as rampant at the top in the States as it is in India. As you well know, it's perfectly fine to call the Congress termites, but all hell is raised when some unmentionable character calls him niche. I think I'll wind up here. We can always take it afterwards. Thank you for your infinite patience, really.